right? Years ago, the Anunnaki opened a portal between the third and the fourth dimension, and then they ignited a nuclear type of explosion that collapsed the fourth into the third. So now we need sleep. We need to be able to live in two dimensions simultaneously, and nature has a way of like adjusting to whatever you throw at it. So when we go to sleep, our dreams is fourth dimensional mental matrix. When we are awake, we in three-dimensional fixed position reality of the 3D matrix. The three-dimensional matrix has a damper on it. It's like putting a silencer on a gun, and that's the holographic projector system set up by the Dark Knight satellite and the moon. And that's what keep us thinking that this is more real than higher dimensions, which has been here longer.
So the Dark Knight satellite and the moon work together to keep this holographic projection in place.
That's why they never collide. They're not even supposed to be. Okay, you got the Dark Knight satellite going with a north-south polar orbit, whereas the moon goes in the east-west equatorial orbit, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But they on the same trajectory lines, but they never collide. That doesn't make sense unless it's controlled, because they move at different speeds, but they never collide.
So the ancients, this Anunnaki, could you go in a little more depth about what happened and when they opened up this portal that collapsed the fourth dimension into the third dimension? What was life like before this, before they did this?
Well, we didn't need sleep for one. We didn't perceive the concept of time. The concept of time is it's a delay in your ability to manifest your creative potential. Whereas you didn't have a delay before. It was like everybody was fighting these conjure wars all the time. It was like, we don't talk about the conjure wars. The people had all these mystic powers, and they would liberally use them. But most of the people were what we call benevolent, good-hearted, kind people, and they would normally, you didn't have a conflict that required nefarious violence. What we would do is we were more into the healing arts, the learning. Like, this was University Earth before it became what it is now, the prison planet. Mm-hmm. It became the prison planet because one of the Anunnaki didn't like the feminine nature of the matriarchs that ran the planet and the feminine nature of the planet, and wanted to, his name was Enlil. Now, caveat, which means buyer beware. The caveat is this: I read this stuff as energy, but it's told in story format, like a conceptual physics story, so that people can more readily grasp these concepts. When you tell them in story form, it makes it easier for them to understand what you're talking about than if you was to put it in a mathematical formula. Mm-hmm. So even when I talk about the mothership, I can only read it as an energy till I see it. Mm-hmm. Anything that you don't see, you have to read it as an energy signature. And the description of the thing tells you the nature or the energy expression that's being expressed. The mother plane is just when you read it as an energy, it's all things coming forth from the divine feminine as the great mother. But when you read it as an actual construct, it becomes a physical object, right? And if you haven't seen it, you got a miscalculation taking place because you can't physically see the object. You have to read it as an energy. Anything that somebody tell you that you can't physically see, the description tells you the nature of the energy that's being used. So you have to read it as the energy first before you apply it to the 3D reality, because the 3D reality is primarily elusive in its understanding of spiritual things, because you have to translate it like a foreign language into the common language. If you're in China, you got to translate it into Chinese. If you're in America, you got to translate it into American English. If you're in London, you have to be able to translate it into the Queen's English. So all these different perceptions, you still have to be able to reduce them to a common descriptive analysis that the average person can digest and utilize the information to its greatest advantage. So always read it as an energy first until you see it. Yeah, it's funny. Yeah. So all of those things come from different star systems. You ever heard of the Voynich manuscript?
Yeah, I did, but I don't know what that is. But I heard that name is familiar.
So the Voynich manuscript is an ancient manuscript that nobody can translate. But what it is an order catalog for the flora and fauna of the earth.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of the stuff in there we didn't order. But like cannabis comes from the Canis star system.
Mm-hmm.
And is used to facilitate higher consciousness and to turn into a human lie detector.
Mm-hmm.
Mushrooms, psilocybins, comes from a different star system with a group of beings that we call the Deros, which is prone to obesity. Think farmers with overalls, the fat, pot belly, overweight. This is what they look like. The obesity gene. Remember when they discovered the obesity gene?
Mm-hmm.
The obesity gene is the Deros gene, right? Then you have the coneheads, the Teros, right? And all of these different beings, when they came, they brought with them the tools to teach higher consciousness that they use on their planet or in their star system.
Mm-hmm.
And they scattered them around the world. The coca plant is native to over here.
Okay.
The marijuana is native to over here, but the priests from Tibet end up taking it over there. When Tahuti sent the temple priests from the pyramids around the world to spread knowledge, they found that the THC builds up something called an endocannabinoid system.
Mm-hmm.
The endocannabinoid system is your spirit body connection to your physical body. So you have endocannabinoid receptors on every major organ.
Mm-hmm.